Imagine the most prolific female serial killer in recorded history.
Right, a really terrifying thought.
Yeah, totally. A woman who is, historically branded as Countess Dracula.
The ultimate monster.
Exactly. But now I want you to imagine that she didn't actually commit a single crime.
Oh, wow.
Right. Imagine she was actually the victim of, the most brilliant, ruthless, politically motivated frame-up of the entire 16th century.
Which is just a wild pivot from the vampire stuff.
It really is. So today, for this deep dive, we are taking that whole vampire folklore, tearing it right up and looking at the terrifying, actual, real story of Elizabeth Báthory.
I am so ready for this.
Yeah, we're basically going to treat this deep dive as a story-driven biography. We really want to dig into the actual historical record, the gruesome trial testimonies, and the completely wild geopolitics of 16th century Hungary.
Which, I mean, that requires walking an incredibly tense line. Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Because the sources you've brought for us to explore today, they contain over 300 witness testimonies. And these detail just unimaginable, horrific atrocities.
Right.
But then those exact same documents also contain undeniable structural evidence of a sweeping political conspiracy.
Like a massive cover-up.
Exactly. A conspiracy designed specifically to steal her colossal fortune.
It's crazy. So to really understand how one person could simultaneously be, a sadistic monster and a political martyr, we have to first establish the sheer scale of her power.
Which is just astronomical.
It really was. So Elizabeth Báthory was born in 1560 into the House of Báthory. And to put this level of privilege into perspective for you, her uncle was the King of Poland.
Which is wild.
Right. And she was raised as a Calvinist Protestant. Plus, she was exceptionally educated. I mean, she spoke Latin, German, Hungarian, and Greek.
And that education, combined with her religion, it immediately made her an anomaly. Well, she wasn't just wealthy. She was a fiercely independent Calvinist holding this unprecedented amount of real estate right in the absolute middle of the Catholic Habsburg Empire.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, in the 1600s, holding a different faith while controlling that much land. It didn't just make you unpopular.
Yeah.
It basically made you a walking, breathing national security threat to the Catholic crown.
That makes total sense. And even before the politics really came into play, her early life was already shattered by these deeply unsettling whispers.
Yeah, the rumors started early.
They did. The historical record actually notes that she suffered from severe seizures. We would likely diagnose that today as epilepsy.
Right.
But, 16th century medicine was completely barbaric.
Oh, utterly.
One of the accepted treatments for a seizure at the time actually involved rubbing the blood of a non-sufferer right on the epileptic person's lips.
Which, is a detail that becomes this glaring psychological anchor when you are looking for the origin story of a blood countess.
Oh, absolutely. It plants that seed early on. But the rumors didn't even stop at medical treatments.
No, they got much more scandalous.
Yeah, decades later, local peasants spread this story that when Elizabeth was just 13 years old, she became pregnant by a peasant boy.
Wow.
And according to this rumor, the powerful Báthory family paid off a local woman to just smuggle the baby away to Wallachia, basically burying the scandal forever.
Now, we don't really have hard proof that the pregnancy actually happened.
Right, it's just a rumor in the sources.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it brilliantly sets the stage for a life defined by, intense secrecy and absolute control.
Totally. Because she held so much wealth as a teenager, she inevitably became a geopolitical chess piece.
Right.
So in 1575, she enters this highly strategic marriage to Count Ferenc Nadasdy.
A very powerful guy.
Very. He quickly becomes the chief commander of the Hungarian troops fighting the Ottomans, which means he is constantly away, fighting what was known as the Long War.
And because her husband was permanently stationed on the front lines, the survival of their sprawling estates fell entirely on her shoulders.
She wasn't just sitting around, right?
No, not at all. She wasn't just sitting in a castle throwing banquets. She was actively defending the primary trade route to Vienna from Ottoman attacks.
Wow.
Yeah, she controlled the economy and the agricultural output of 17 adjacent villages.
I want to pause here really quickly because I think this is vital for you listening to understand. She was basically operating as a modern wartime CEO.
Oh, completely.
Like she was running a sprawling corporate conglomerate, but she also had a literal army at her disposal.
And a mandate to keep her workforce alive, too.
Right.
Crucially, as the highest-ranking noblewoman in the region, she was solely responsible for providing medical care to the people living on her lands during this brutal, drawn-out war.
So she's running hospitals, basically.
Yeah, she was overseeing triage, managing supply chains, funding the local economy, all of it.
So she builds this staggering level of independence and authority. And then when Nadezhdy dies in 1604, she doesn't do what widows of her era were, expected to do.
Right, the usual path.
Yeah, she doesn't fade away into a nunnery. She doesn't immediately remarry to hand over her wealth.
She holds on to it.
Exactly. She remains a fiercely independent, wildly rich widow holding some of the most strategic fortresses in Europe.
And, well, when you are a widow holding that much power, you become a target.
Naturally. And the timeline aligns perfectly with her husband's death, doesn't it?
It really does. Right between 1602 and 1604, a Lutheran minister named Istvan Magyuri begins making these very public, very loud complaints about atrocities occurring at Báthory's estates.
Just shouting it from the rooftops.
Yeah. And he actually bypasses the local authorities entirely and takes these complaints all the way up to the royal court in Vienna.
So the king at the time, Matthias II, he assigns a man named György Thurzo to investigate.
Thurzo was a big deal.
Huge deal. He's the Palatine of Hungary, which is essentially the highest-ranking political official right under the king himself.
Right.
So Thurzo deploys notaries, guys like Moses Cheraki and Andras Kersturi, to systematically collect evidence.
What they found.
Yeah, and the things they record in these official testimonies, I actually need to issue a very real trigger warning for you listening right now because the details are bleak.
Extremely bleak. The notaries collected descriptions of systematic, prolonged torture.
It's awful.
Witnesses claimed that Báthory beat victims with cudgels, that she forced needles under their fingernails.
Ugh.
They said she sliced flesh from their shoulders and buttocks and actually roasted it. And she forced naked girls to stand outside in the freezing winter snow while doused with water until they just died of exposure.
It's horrifying. And what makes this so chilling to me is these weren't just vague peasant rumors circulating in a tavern somewhere.
No, they were formal testimonies.
Right. They had specific names and incredibly detailed corroborated accounts. And these were from people who were not under the threat of torture when they spoke.
That's a huge distinction.
Yeah. You have Benedict de Zeo, who was the head of her own staff.
Right.
He testified under oath that he watched her torment a girl named Ilanka. He described Báthory shoving a knife up the girl's arms and burning her with candles until the victim essentially ended her own life just to stop the pain.
It's incredibly dark. We also see testimony from Gurgely Pazdory. Now, he was a court judge at her castle in Sarvar.
So a guy with actual legal standing.
Exactly. He went on the record about a married woman named Model. Model apparently pleaded with Báthory, basically arguing she couldn't perform the tasks of a young, unmarried girl.
And what happened?
The recorded punishment was having her flesh cut out and roasted.
Oh, my God.
And then, you have the damning words of Báthory's own accomplice, this servant named Dorothea Sentes.
What did she say?
She testified that when Báthory drove needles into the girl's fingers, she would mock them. She'd say, if it hurts the whore, then she can pull it out.
Wow.
But if the victim actually did pull the needle out, Báthory would simply cut off the finger.
Okay, I have to stop here and ask the obvious question.
Sure.
Because we are talking about the feudal system in the 16th century, right? Lords and ladies could basically do whatever they wanted to the peasants living on their land.
Essentially, yes.
It was a brutal, completely unbalanced hierarchy, but it was the accepted norm.
Right.
So why did these specific, albeit completely horrific crimes suddenly trigger a royal investigation spearheaded by the Palatine of Hungary?
It's the core question.
Ew.
And to understand that sudden royal interest, we have to look at a fatal shift in her victim profile.
Okay.
For years, she allegedly tortured and killed peasants. And the crown entirely looked the other way. They just didn't care.
As they did back then.
Right. But eventually, the local peasant families caught on. They stopped allowing their daughters to work at her castles. The labor pool basically dried up.
So she ran out of victims.
Exactly. She needed a new source of young women. So she made a catastrophic miscalculation. She began taking in the daughters of the lesser gentry.
And this brings us to the Gynaeceum.
Yes, the finishing school.
Right. In the winter of 1609, she opens what is essentially a finishing school for high-born young women at her castle.
And you have to think of this finishing school as like an exclusive, high-stakes, modern internship.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. The lower nobility saw this as a golden ticket. They eagerly sent their teenage daughters off to Elizabeth Báthory.
Hoping for what, exactly?
Well, expecting them to learn courtly etiquette, make powerful connections, and, secure, advantageous marriages. It was a trade of free labor for upward social mobility.
Except it was a trap.
A deadly one.
The noble girls started disappearing.
Ah.
And as you can imagine, you cannot just vanish the daughters of the nobility without questions being asked.
No, the parents are going to notice.
Exactly. The parents start demanding answers. So Báthory concocts this completely wild cover story.
It's so absurd.
It really is. She sends word that one of the girls in the finishing school suddenly went insane, murdered all of her classmates to steal their jewelry, and then committed suicide.
Which is a story that absolutely no one believed.
Not a single person.
The families of the lesser gentry revolted. You had noblewomen like Anna Zalesky and Georgia Jezerniski giving sworn legal statements.
Saying what?
Stating that they had entrusted their daughters to this school only for them to be tortured and murdered.
Unbelievable.
But the real tipping point, the thing that blows it all open, comes from Michael Horvath, the castellan of Chete Castle.
Oh, the dogs.
Yes. He testified that the volume of bodies became so unmanageable that they were being buried in these incredibly shallow graves in the garden.
So grim.
He literally painted this apocalyptic image of stray dogs digging up the corpses and running around the courtyard carrying human body parts in their mouths.
I mean, that is straight out of a modern true crime thriller.
It really is.
And politically, it forces the king's hand, doesn't it?
It leaves him no choice.
Because dozens of formal complaints from the Hungarian nobility are just flooding into King Matthias II.
Right.
He could easily ignore dead peasants. He absolutely could not ignore dead nobles without risking a full-blown revolt from the gentry.
Which accelerates the timeline directly to the raid.
December 1610.
Exactly.
Yeah.
December 1610, Jurgi Thurzo arrives at Chete Castle to place Elizabeth Báthory under arrest.
Now, we need to completely dispel a pervasive myth right here for you listening.
Oh, the bloody dungeon myth.
Yes. If you have ever seen a movie or read a fictionalized account of this, she is almost always caught red-handed.
Always.
Like she's standing in a dungeon covered in blood, actively torturing a victim when the doors just burst open.
Right, but the historical reality is painfully mundane.
So boring in comparison.
When Thurzo and his men arrived to arrest the most infamous accused killer in Europe, she was simply eating dinner.
Just having dinner.
Just eating. Now, Thurzo claimed in his report that he found one dead girl and another prey girl alive inside the castle, but there was no dramatic, bloody confrontation.
Right.
Later on, a local pastor named Barocius asked Báthory directly why she didn't stop her servants from committing these murders.
And her response is chilling.
Very. She allegedly gave this direct confession. She told him, "I did it because even I myself was afraid of them."
Wow. But that specific statement is heavily scrutinized, right? Because she offered it herself. It wasn't abstracted under the side of the rack.
Exactly. No torture involved for her.
But for her servants, her accomplices, the legal proceedings were just a waking nightmare of medieval justice.
Absolutely brutal.
Servants like Ilona Jo and Doria Cezentes were tortured into confessing. They literally had their fingers torn out with red-hot iron pincers before being burned alive at the stake.
That's horrific.
And a younger accomplice, János Ujvari, was shown what passed for mercy at the time.
Meaning he was beheaded first.
Right. He was beheaded before his corpse was thrown onto the pyre.
And it's these accomplices, while being actively tortured, who provide the really staggering body counts, right?
Yeah, this is where the famous numbers come from.
This is where that infamous number of 650 victims originates. One servant claims she saw that exact number meticulously recorded in Báthory's private, handwritten diary.
A diary that remarkably was never actually found by Thurzo or any of his investigators.
Never found. It's a phantom diary.
Right. But even disregarding the diary, the numbers presented at trial were still astronomical.
Oh, totally. Balthazar Poki, another Castellan, testified that he had heard reports of nearly 300 victims at the Sarvar Castle alone.
Okay, I have to push back on the legal mechanics playing out here.
Go for it.
Because the peasant servants get their fingers ripped off and are burned at the stake.
Right.
But the alleged mastermind, the billionaire countess running the entire operation, she gets to calmly sit down, write out her last will and testament, and just chill in her castle. How does that work?
Well, this is where we have to peel back the layers of class privilege and expose the raw financial machinery driving the entire trial.
Follow the plan.
Always. The king, Matthias II, was livid. We actually have his letters. He wrote an incredibly angry directive to Thurzo demanding a proper public trial and the absolute death penalty for Elizabeth Báthory.
Because if she gets the death penalty, the crown automatically gets to seize her estates.
Exactly.
And we haven't mentioned this yet, but didn't King Matthias owe her a staggering amount of money?
He was completely drowning in debt to her.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, to finance the mercenary armies fighting the Long War, the king had to take out exorbitant loans from his wealthiest nobles. And Elizabeth Báthory was his biggest creditor.
So if she dies?
If she is executed as a murderer or a traitor, his massive financial debt just vanishes into thin air and he absorbs her lands.
That is quite the motive.
But Thurzo, the lead investigator, he quietly meets with Báthory's family, specifically her son Pal and her son-in-law Zrini.
I want you to really picture this if you're listening. Think of this as a high-stakes, white-collar plea deal.
That's a great way to put it.
They basically threw the peasant servants under the bus, letting them take the literal fall at the stake so the billionaire CEO could quietly step down and keep the company assets in the family.
That is the exact mechanism. Thurzo and her own family conspire against the king. They make a secret backroom deal to defy the royal order of execution.
And what do they do instead?
Instead, they place her under strict house arrest. This shielded the Báthory family from the public shame of an execution. But far more importantly, it prevented the king from seizing the real estate.
So Pal kept his inheritance.
Pal kept his inheritance, and Thurzo kept a very powerful ally.
So what does this all mean? We have a story with hundreds of dead bodies and dogs digging up shallow graves.
Right.
But we also have kings trying to erase their national debt and nobles executing secret backroom deals to protect massive real estate empires.
Which is so messy.
It is, and this brings us perfectly to the modern historical debate. Because starting in the 1980s, scholars like Laszlo Nagy began re-examining all this evidence and asking a radical question.
What if she didn't do any of it?
Exactly. What if this entire nightmare was a meticulously planned frame-up?
And, the frame-up theory becomes incredibly compelling when you map out the geopolitical chessboard of 1600s Europe.
How so?
As we established earlier, she was a highly powerful, fiercely independent Calvinist in a Catholic empire.
Right.
But her nephew, Prince Gábor Báthory, had just become the ruler of Transylvania.
Oh, that's a big deal.
Very big. He was young, ambitious, and actively threatening King Matthias's hold on Hungary. Elizabeth's immense wealth and strategic fortresses could have easily funded and protected a full-scale rebellion against the king.
So she isn't just a rich widow anymore. She is a sweeping geopolitical liability.
Exactly the problem. Framing her and locking her away removes the military threat, cancels the king's crippling debt, and neuters the entire Báthory family's influence in one swift move.
A triple win for the king.
Yeah, and furthermore, Thurzo, the investigator who orchestrated her downfall, he had his own intense political ambitions.
What did he want?
He wanted his own son to eventually rule Transylvania, which placed him in direct, hostile competition with Elizabeth's family. Taking her off the board basically cleared a path for his own bloodline.
Okay, so the political motives are undeniable. It makes perfect sense that ambitious men wanted to strip her of her money and her land.
Right.
But I have to challenge this theory. If this was a total fabrication, how do the scholars explain the dead girls? How do they explain the bodies?
Well, the counter-argument leans heavily on her established role as a 16th century landowner. As we discussed, female landowners were specifically mandated to provide medical care for female patients on their estates.
The hospital angle.
Right. Scholars like Irma Sadetsky-Kardos argue that when Thurzo raided Seti Castle, he didn't stumble into a sadistic torture chamber. He walked into a medieval hospital.
And medieval medicine was brutal.
Horrific. I mean, we are talking about bloodletting, cauterizing wounds with boiling oil, treating infections by cutting away rotting flesh.
Oh, gross.
Yeah, so the theory suggests that the mutilated and dying girls Thurzo claimed to find were simply sick patients receiving standard, rudimentary 16th century medical treatments.
I see.
To an untrained eye or, to an investigator actively looking for an excuse, a medieval hospital looks exactly like a torture chamber.
I hear that. I really do. But what about the non-tortured witnesses?
The nobles and staff.
Right. You have noblewomen, you have her own head of staff, the court judge, dozens of people giving highly specific, terrifyingly corroborated details of sadistic torture.
It's hard to ignore.
And stray dogs digging up shallow graves because there are too many bodies to bury. That does not sound like standard hospital procedure, even in the 1600s.
It really doesn't. And that tension, that's exactly the synthesis we have to arrive at when looking at her life.
So what's the middle ground?
It is highly probable that both realities coexist. Elizabeth Báthory may very well have been a genuinely cruel, sadistic abuser who murdered her servants without any remorse.
Okay.
But in the feudal system, her crimes were entirely ignored by the state. They only mattered when they became politically useful to her enemies.
Ah, right.
Once she became a liability to the king and a roadblock to Thurzo, those genuine horrific crimes were weaponized, exaggerated, and used as the legal pretext for a colossal land grab.
She sits right at the terrifying intersection of true crime and political conspiracy.
Exactly.
And ultimately, because of that vacuum deal, she avoids the fire. She is confined to Sete Castle. Now, the myth tells us she was bricked up inside a single room with only a tiny slit to slide food through, just left to rot in the dark.
Which, again, the historical record completely refutes.
Oh, it does.
We have surviving documents from priests who visited her in 1614. They note she was able to move unhindered throughout the castle and its grounds.
So she wasn't bricked up at all?
Not at all. It was essentially a luxurious, comfortable house arrest. She remained there until August 1614.
Then how does she die?
Well, one evening, she complained to her bodyguard that her hands were cold. He told her to go lie down, and she simply died in her sleep at the age of 54.
And her burial location today is completely unknown.
Lost to history.
But while the woman quietly passed away, the monster myth was really just getting started.
Oh, definitely.
Let's talk about the bloodbaths. The single most famous detail attached to Elizabeth Báthory is that she bathed in the blood of virgins to retain her youthful appearance.
Yeah, and it is completely fabricated.
Not true at all.
Not at all. That specific detail did not appear in print anywhere until 1729. It was written by a Jesuit scholar named Laszlo Tarozzi well over a century after she died.
Wow.
Yeah, when historians finally unearthed and published the actual trial transcripts in the 19th century, there wasn't a single mention of a bloodbath anywhere in the 300 testimonies.
That's wild. And to burst one final pop culture bubble for you listening, there is zero direct evidence in Bram Stoker's notes that she inspired the novel Dracula.
People love that myth.
They really do. People love to casually state she is the Countess Dracula, but Stoker's own meticulous research notes simply do not back that up.
It really highlights how eager society is to turn complex, muddy history into a gothic fairy tale,
For sure.
The actual truth that a wealthy aristocrat systematically abused her power and was then cannibalized by an equally corrupt political justice system is much harder for us to digest than just a simple story about a vampire.
We started this deep dive talking about paradoxes, about how hard it is to categorize historical figures as pure heroes or pure villains.
Right.
When you look at the incredibly complex life of Elizabeth Báthory, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over.
What's that?
We know she was astonishingly wealthy. We know she held immense geopolitical power. And we know she was, in all likelihood, incredibly cruel to the people beneath her. But if Elizabeth Báthory had been a man with that exact same wealth, that exact same power, and that exact same cruelty, would these accusations have ever seen the light of day?
That is the question.
Or is her lasting legacy just a testament to what happens when an unprotected woman holds too much of the map in a world ruled by ambitious men? Think about that.